Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Backline. My name is Adam Colley, alumnus of the Second City Main Stage.
And my name is Rob Norman. I'm author of the cool improv book, Improvising Now, A Practical Guide to Modern Improv.
Rob, wasn't it weird to have an ad?
Yeah, I'm still reeling.
We got asked to put some ads on our podcast, and we mulled it over, and we said, what do we have to do? And we were told, very little. And we said, yeah, okay.
Thanks, Sonar Network.
Rob, how are you?
Well, I mean, first things I just want to say is I just want to make a guarantee to you, the listener, that, for us, the continued same level of burns, same level of laissez-faire production value, nothing will change. We haven't sold out. We're still the same old guys who sound exactly the same.
Yeah. What do you mean?
I mean, all this money coming in, like, are we going to start having
Oh,
special
yeah.
hats, like we're eating caviar on mic, like stuff like that? That's not going to change. We're going to keep doing that.
Yeah, my assistant told me that your assistant got a different kind of tea and you fired them and you created like this big social media campaign against them.
Well, I didn't have to do that. The fans of Johnny Depp did that for me, so it was easy.
That's nice. Well, yeah, I'm glad you're keeping humble. And in addition to all of that, what's going on in your life? What are you up to?
We got a big trip coming up. We're off to Texas, and so I'm just kind of getting my life in order. You know, I was living in the pandemic completely unaware of things like I should probably clean my clothes, I should probably shower, I should probably brush my teeth. And
Hmm.
now I'm reintegrating to life. And the last thing I want is to get to the hotel room with you and you be like, what's going on? You don't have this important thing. So I'm just putting it all together. Maybe get some new clothes. Maybe get some show clothes. It's been a while.
Ooh.
Who knows? Who knows where the wicked wind blows?
That'll be very fun. Yeah, I think when you and I go on tour, we really get to feel what it's like to live with the other person and what like each of our wives would deal with on a day-to-day basis. But I think the other thing is that as we get older, you really start to embrace what other people tease you about. Like when I used to tour with Second City, Jay McCarroll of Nirvana, the Nirvana the band, the show fame, would always make fun of me because I'd get to a hotel and my first thing would be I'd set up my toiletries. Like I'd go into the bathroom and I'd set up deodorant and toothpaste and toothbrush and just have a little section of like, this is where my stuff is. And I think at first I was like, oh, it's a little embarrassing. I don't want to be known as that guy. And now I'm like, yep, that's exactly who I am. And I love it. And I will continue to do that thing. So I think when we get to go on tour, we get to see like, oh, right, I forgot Rob does that thing. And you know what? That's okay. And we embrace each other.
Wait, what's the thing that I do other than be agreeable and go along with whatever you want to do?
Well, you definitely need quiet time. You need some recharge time for yourself. You definitely like to wake up and get into the bags of chips and have a little chip breakfast. So, stuff like that. And then, after the show, you like to have a little talk about the show and have a little
Mm-hmm.
walk about the show. So, all things that I love. But I think
Yeah.
it's nice to get to the point where you're like, hey, this is what people might tease me about, and I still love myself.
Yeah. Self love is so absolutely important.
That's all. That's all I was saying. So if you are in the Dallas area, come hang out with us. We've got workshops on Saturday and Sunday. We've got shows on Friday and Saturday, and then we need stuff to do. So if you are from that area, if you visited that area and you have things that you're like, ooh, I think Adam and Rob might actually enjoy this bar, this architecture, this coffee shop, this place to get a nice Dallas style tea, all of those things, send them over. And we want to live it up in Dallas. But Rob, back to how we make that sweet, sweet cash on these ads. It's talking improv. And I had a thought um,
Mm-hmm.
because something came up in a show that I did recently where there was a laugh. And I thought, huh, that killed, but that might be what some consider hack. And hack is a term that's pretty broad. And I kind of
Mm-hmm.
wanted to break it down because I think as improvisers, we have a unique challenge and a unique opportunity with what is considered hack. And so, just generally, if you're not familiar with this term, Rob, how would you describe being or doing hack things?
I think it's a little bit more complicated than I originally thought. Like, I just kind of feel like, oh, it's inherently hack. It means it's a joke that isn't very good. But in preparation for this podcast, I had to think about it a little bit deeper. And I think it has a lot to do with stand up, strangely enough. For us, with an improv, clown, and sketch, we have our own kind of rules and modalities that we're dealing with. But when it comes to the ethics of comedy or what's good comedy, most of that's defined by stand up comics.
Hmm.
And for stand up comics creating material, the way they create their material is they go on stage, they have a loose premise, they talk about it on stage. Things that do well, they bring back and they do again and again and again until they find material that really works. There are jokes that are so tight, they have 5 or 6 tags to them, and the laughs have to fall on the exact spot. You have to use the exact words. You are a wizard casting a spell. That's what a stand up comedian is. So, the biggest crime you can commit in stand up is for you to do your stand up routine, for me to hear a joke, and then for me to go on stage and tell that joke because I have a shortcut. I'm not doing any of the work and I'm telling a joke that you worked on and taking credit for it. Because of that, stand up comedians have an absolute obsession with making sure that they are giving original new material that they own. When we talk about hack comedy, it's kind of an offshoot of stealing jokes, which a hack joke is a shortcut that has a positive response. It gets some sort of laughter or response from the audience. However, that material is either very frequently used, so it's a well-trodden joke. It's a joke that anyone can do, and or it's a joke that people hear frequently. So a hack joke is a shortcut joke that may do well in a room, but comedians find frustrating because it's an easy joke that anyone can do.
Yeah, it's so funny because in stand up, you hear these terms like a comedian's comedian, right? So, someone who, like a comedian you probably know if you're listening to this podcast named Andy Kindler,
Mm-hmm.
he would do something like the State of the Union address at Just for Laughs because people respect him. People say, like, you're a comedian that comedians love to watch. And ironically, those comedians are usually the ones who are not as mainstream as other comedians. So my parents wouldn't know Andy Kindler, right? My brother may not know Andy Kindler, but he loves comedy. He would go and see big name comedians. And so it's this strange balance between success and being true to yourself or being artistically honorable, but it's so odd because it's like who decides these things? And if someone is critically respected but not mainstream successful, is that a success or is that a failure? It's a very odd road to navigate, and that's why I thought it would be really cool to talk about today.
Yeah, and I feel like, when we talk about the kind of environment of art, when we're making art, what does that feel like? The landscape. It usually is one person who's kind of on the fringe, creating an idea, showing an idea, exploring an idea that is perhaps unpalatable to the general audience. And then most often there's someone who is able to take that weird idea and along those lines create something that is inspired by that previous fringe work and make it palatable for regular people. So like, for example, a really good example of that would be like Radiohead. Radiohead is like one of my favorite bands. And Radiohead's favorite band is this band called Godspeed You Black Emperor. And the last time I went to a Godspeed You Black Emperor show, their last song was 30 minutes long, and it was the sound of an airplane landing in slow motion. So that's not a joke. That's not a joke at all. It was the
No,
sound
I
of.
believe that it's real, and I believe that you bought tickets to see it.
It was cool.
But it's like, okay, and this is what I find so interesting, but also frustrating about the topic, because you have a band like Fun. Remember Fun?
I think so.
They had like the songs like "Whoa, Whoa, Whoa." You know, it's just it was all like poppy kind of like I don't know. It felt very much like high school montage music. And I think from what I remember, that was their purpose. Like they went in being like, it's just fun. Like it's just like this is poppy, this is mainstream, and that was the goal. And it's like I could care less about most music. You know what I like? I like old school hip hop and drum and bass. But I found myself being like, oh, I really like this. If I'm driving in a car, I hear this song. It's great. I don't have to think too much about it. But then you get into a mood, or you're in like a different vibe, and you're like, that music, that feels like the most gross thing you could hear right now. When you're in the mood for like a Radiohead vibe, it's like everything else sounds like this is just a bunch of like bullshit music. So it just depends on so many factors, and it's just so interesting of who decides this stuff. So, long story short, we're talking about all this in various aspects of art. How do you feel hack presents itself in the improv world?
I think there are some jokes that when you've been around long enough, you just start to know will work. Hack jokes often are not often discovered from you on stage. You're watching other improvisers make moves, you clock them and go, maybe I'll try that out.
Hmm?
So here in Toronto, when I was coming up at Second City, I figured out really quickly that if I ever got stuck, I could make a joke about the Leafs not being a good hockey team, and it
Hmm.
destroyed. Every single time it destroyed. And at first that felt great. Oh my gosh, I'm so nervous. Like, do the other cast members think I'm funny? Do they think I'm good at improv? Am I going to screw up the scene? Am I going to get fired because I'm not funny enough? Those are all thoughts that you're thinking while you're working at Second City. And so this was a kind of shortcut that allowed me to get that kind of approval from the audience. But over time, you keep making that joke and it gets the same response. And you feel kind of cheap because you didn't have to work for it. You didn't discover it. And then, oh my gosh, and then a new person joins Second City. And you've been there for 3 years and they're just showing up. And they make their first, the Leafs aren't a good hockey team joke. And they get a big laugh. And you look to their face and they feel so self-satisfied. And you go, oof. Yeah, I know. I was there once too, but it's not good for you. It's not good magic. Don't mess with it.
Yeah, it's so funny because like you're at Second City and it's full of tourists, right? It's full of people who know the SCTV or Schitt's Creek or Whose Line or whatever it is, and be like, oh, they've Second City has said, hey, you like Schitt's Creek? Well, these guys are from Second City, Toronto. Come see it. And then
Mm-hmm.
you get there, and then you see a scene of 30 minutes of slow plane landing, and they're like, I will never come back here. Like, what is this thing? So it's just such an interesting, like, because hack compared to who? Hack decided by who? Because if the tourists came in, saw that Leaf joke, and they're like, "That show was so fucking good. Did you not do your job?"
Well, I mean, let's get into it then. Like
Ah!
what is your job? Are you a craftsman? Are you here to amuse the people in front of you? Or are you an artist? Is your job to move the art form forward? And so I think you could make a really good argument that there are many craftsmen in our industry who continue to succeed in front of audiences, but have not contributed to the vocabulary of our art form. And so, I mean, I love a good craftsman. I think that's great. You've done the jokes that we all know work, and you've done them exceptionally well. You're very, very charming. But surely there must be some reward for that weirdo who's like, in their basement scribbling on a piece of full scrap trying to create the new format that everyone's going to do in 2 years from now. Like we need to reward that person as well too, because otherwise the cost of their creations will be too much. There'll be no reward for them, and the cost will be too much, too high.
Well, see, now we're going a little off script here, but that what you just said, it again brings up these questions because, like, what is the reward? Because you take someone um, Andy Kindler,
Mm-hmm.
and you say, well, the reward for your um, authenticity or your craftsmanship is respect within your community, but it is not financial, and it is not mainstream success.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're saying this person must be rewarded, what is the reward? Because would you not be aware that, hey, I'm doing something that is not for everybody? I really love what I'm doing, and it's not for everybody, and I'm happy with that.
I think if you ask the question, what is hack and how do we decide it? And I think it's decided by the community. And what I'm saying is if you remove the value system where you get rid of that line between, oh, like this is hacky and this is not hacky, it's art or whatever. If you dissolve that line, then all of a sudden Andy Kindler doesn't have a reward system, because how do we, if all jokes are equal in the way that you're rhetorically asking, then then there would be no difference between someone who is pushing the art form forward and someone who is just using reused jokes. And I think there should be.
Yeah, it's just really interesting because I definitely grew up in a time where it was Leno versus Letterman. And Letterman was always the avant-garde, the wild card, and Leno was historically the better stand-up. But when you're doing a show like his, The Tonight Show, you have a certain responsibility for middle America of palatable humor. But I remember Letterman making so many like Yankees jokes. The subway is dirty. It smells like urine in New York. Like all these jokes that it's like, yeah, they're not necessarily like avant-garde or like they're not necessarily these like crazy big swings. It's just his attitude of presenting them was a bit more like, I don't care.
Yeah, he would tell those jokes. There would be a pause. He would do that weird fake laugh thing that he did, and then he would throw a card away. And it was like someone had a gun to the head of his wife just off camera, and they were making him tell those jokes. And so, Letterman and Leno's a great example where I go, from Letterman, we definitely see folks like Norm Macdonald being
Mm-hmm.
inspired, Zach Galifianakis. Like his interview style kind of became the alt comedy interview style, or at least an exaggerated version of that thing. Jay Leno is a kind of relic of a style that used to exist when Johnny Carson was around. He was like the last iteration of it. I mean, I guess Jimmy Fallon's still kind of that thing. He's a different version of that thing. But Jay Leno was the last of that style of interview, and we probably won't ever see it again.
So Rob, we are improvisers.
Yeah.
when you talk hack, stand up, sketch, these are all people or art forms where you know ahead of time what you're about to present to the audience. You know, I'm at home, I've written this idea, I've rehearsed this idea, and I'm still gonna present it, hack or not. Improvisers were being told, hey, in the moment, go with your gut, respond instinctually, yes, and your partner's ideas. So, do you feel like improvisers get any leeway here? Are we given a bit of a pass because we didn't decide this, but in the moment, this is what came out, or this is what my partner was leaning towards, and I had to lean in?
Well, it's interesting that you say that because I think we can talk about two different versions of this. Because it's supposed to be improvised, there is a version of this that we can minimize the improv. So I know that a couple troops and a couple schools have kind of figured out this hack, another use of the word, but someone gives an opening line and then you decide you're going to respond either A or B. And everyone does this. Someone says an opening line and then you respond either A or B. That's a kind of cheat, isn't it? Because it's not quite in the spirit of improv to have something that could be anything become so heavily codified. And so it may give you success. It definitely limits your options of what can happen in a show. One might argue that that is a version of a kind of hackiness to improv, that you're putting training wheels on to prevent certain outcomes from happening in your improv show. Maybe. I don't know. But I think you're really getting at is content, which is when someone starts making a joke about the suburbs just outside the major city that you live and ragging on it, which is like a guaranteed laugh. What should you do? Do we get a break from that? Well, I mean, I think my big question would be, what are you contributing the scene to begin with? Because I feel like if you're entering into a scene and you are pushing your improv forward, if you're starting, for example, with a emotion that you've never seen anyone ever play on stage, and you step on stage with that, and that's the beginning of the scene, your scene partner goes, ugh, just came from Oshawa. Boy, does that place stink. You can't help but respond to Oshawa, but the way that you do it will be unique. That's very different than me walking on stage with nothing. You going, wow, Oshawa stinks like a butt. And I go, hey, I'm the mayor. And then we do Oshawa jokes for 4 minutes. So, yeah, I mean, I think you should not get a pass. And in fact, maybe with an improv, because anything should be able to happen, maybe we should hold ourselves to a higher standard of not repeating jokes or not going to safe territories.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, let's say you are in a scene and on a you're on a date in your scene,
Yeah.
and someone says, "Wow, I've never been to this restaurant before. It's really unique." And you're like, "Okay, I'm gonna yes and this," and you have this opportunity. You know, if I say something like the Olive Garden, I will probably get a laugh.
Yep.
Or I could improvise a restaurant that doesn't exist and probably get nothing, or take a chance with a funny name of a restaurant that doesn't exist, a unique name. But you know that that opportunity is right there. Someone's set up this real easy, right down the middle ball, this pitch, and you're like, I could easily knock this out of the park. Do you take it or do you don't?
Well, I would also say, what were you doing between the last time you made that Olive Garden joke, and now? You weren't out in the world. You weren't observing anything. You know, within the Toronto improv community, there's been a couple jokes that have made a tour. I guess how I would describe it. So
Uh-huh.
one of those examples would be Jeff with a G, like Geoff.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That joke was going around for a while. People were liking that, much to the chagrin of our good friend Jeff, who spells his name with a G.
Jeff.
Bitcoin was doing the rounds. May still be making the rounds. Like Deloitte and Touche was a very funny company that people were really enjoying saying on stage. I work at Deloitte and Touche. So, yeah, if these references are circulating, it's fine. You can jump on board that train, but you can't find another restaurant between now and then. You can't be thinking of observing, going out into the world and thinking about other places. Krabby Joe's, Boston Pizza, where they put a pierogi on the pizza. It's like 2 meals in one. Like,
But sure, but is that just not a different version?
well, it depends who's done it before, right? Like that kind of joke, I don't think I have a problem with. I think my issue is you're doing a joke that didn't come from your real world observation. It came from observing other people do that joke.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's my issue. If you were to say to me, tension, undercut the tension was something minimizing, well, if I'm not allowed to do that, then I don't think I could do comedy anymore. That's like 20% of all jokes. It's reaching for that reference and making it unique to yourself.
Yeah, I'm down with that. I think it is an interesting thin line between specificity that you have created versus repeating someone else's specificity.
I mean, yeah. Also, it's like, you know, do I want to brag right now? I guess so. Like, did I arrive
You're gonna
first to
brag?
did I arrive first to Minotaur jokes? Probably. You know what I mean? Who else is bringing that hardcore Minotaur content on a day-to-day basis? Now in Toronto, you go to a show, Minotaurs all the time. Everyone's doing Minotaurs. It's Minotaur Heralds or whatever. And that's fine, right? It's like, cool, that was my thing. Everyone started doing it. And now I have a new thing, right? Which is like this
Well, that's
new
I
stuff, like
think
more
that's
like
why I
cyberpunk and
respect.
like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I respect what you do on stage because you're not interested in mainstream success or community respect,
Oh,
right? You're
critical
doing your
response.
own, yeah, you're just doing Minotaur and you're looking for that Minotaur community. And you're one of the originators.
Yeah. And when I take the show to Crete, it's going to do very well.
Dude, the Crete Improv Festival is all about you. Now, thinking of that, hey, I'm going to go to Crete and do a bunch of Minotaur jokes. Depending on the show you're doing, the job you've been asked to do, the day of the week the show is on, the type of crowd you've got, are hack jokes ever bad? Or are hack jokes always bad? Or are they ever like, hey man, you saved us with that? Like I know what you did, and that really got the crowd back on our side.
Well, I mean, I can tell you right now, I've seen people bomb and reach for those jokes, and the audience is already against them. Ooh, does that sting even worse?
Oh
If you can't
yes,
get a laugh with a Leafs joke, something went so bad in your show, so bad in your scene. That's the saddest thing I've ever seen. The saddest thing I've ever seen is someone bomb and then them reach for the easy jokes, and even the easy jokes betray them. Oof, rough. I think it depends on what kind of show you're doing. I mean, not to be glib, but hack jokes in a hack show seems like a pretty good fit to me. I spent many years directing or performing on cruise ships doing improv there. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about showmanship. I learned a lot about charisma. I learned a lot about joke structure. And I learned a lot about saying jokes quickly. We had tried to do some more complicated long form, and it failed 100% of the time. The audience's attention was not there. You had to get their attention and keep it. On cruise ships, there are no like tickets, obviously, because you've already paid for this cruise ship. But also, there's no like onus when you attend a show to watch the show. So while you are performing, people just get up and leave. They go get an ice cream, and then they just come back. They come back like 5 scenes later. And you're like, this is like, you wouldn't do this in a movie theater. But for some reason, you're doing this where the performers can see you do this. So that changes your relationship with the kind of material that you want to do or the kind of material that you want to put out there, because it's not going to be received in the way that one might hope. So, yeah, I feel like if you have a I was going to say the right show, the wrong show ultimately, then I think I think two hack jokes somehow make a right. Hack jokes and hack show somehow ends up being the right answer.
Yeah, it's again, it's like, look, if you've accepted that you are, if you've accepted a job and said, yes, I will take your money to entertain this crowd, then it's like, well, all bets are off, right? You've accepted this contract, and so hack jokes may be your best weapon against ice cream crowd.
Oh, you're paying me to do a murder mystery? Bro, yo, bro, I'm gonna fucking do it, bro. I'm not like not even a joke. I'm doing all of those jokes, bro. Yeah, I just feel like if you're getting paid, then that's a very different conversation. I'll do whatever you want if you're gonna pay me.
Yeah. um, Rob, as we wrap up, there seems to have been like a trend, an annual reflection of like what is the current hack joke, right? And I mean, like, I remember early Second City days, they would get upset if you referenced like an author or a poet, right? You're like, the 60s, like Chicago, it was like, well, you can't just reference this poet. It's like, well, of course you're gonna get the laugh. In the 80s, stand up was all about men and women are different, right? Right? Oh God, I'm at home with my wife. Oh, my husband's such an idiot. Um, do you feel any trend right now, or where you can see that kind of what the zeitgeisty hackness will be going forward?
I mean, we can just kind of outline the classics, which is like Leafs, beer, suburbs. Um, those are that's like the trifecta right there. Can you think of any others, Adam? What am I missing? Anything else?
I mean, it felt like in the last few years, like the political Trumpness was
Trump.
very
Oh, great.
much
Trump's a great example of that. Um, yeah, I
like
mean,
I
there's
don't think any of us have heard a unique Trump take in a few years, just
mhm.
different iterations of the same jokes.
Yeah, and sometimes comedy can be this kind of conversation on delay. So it's like something new happens. So like say for example, it's like we're having a political conversation about white privilege, and so you hear all these sketches that are like talking about white privilege, and then like 5 years later you hear a response to those jokes about white privilege. Like it can kind of feel like, depending on which way the wind blows, we have a kind of influx in material about a certain issue or certain perspective. And I feel like that in itself is inherently hack. I think you showing up to Second City, where you're surrounded by a bunch of leftist performers and leftist producers performing leftist material for a leftist audience. I mean, you're naturally going to do that. And if nobody tries to create material that challenges those beliefs, I'm not saying create alt-right material at all, but what I'm saying is that is critical of the left, then everyone gets off scot-free and everyone leaves the theater space, you know, agreeing with something that they agreed with before stepping into the theater. And so I think good material challenges us. Good improv is dangerous. Um, it does push people's boundaries. It does push people's comfort zones. If we think about the role of comedy, comedy is a fantasy. It's a fantasy space. So it is one of the last safe places that we have to explore ideas that can't exist within regular public discourse. You're going to say the thing that you can't say at a dinner party on stage, and hopefully we all recognize that this isn't necessarily a real idea. But by saying it on stage, maybe we challenge this other belief, and it gives us some kind of insight into ourselves or into the world that we live in. I think anything that we do that continues to challenge each other and challenge ourselves is going to fit nicely with the purpose of comedy. Anything that is comfort food probably is going to be closer to that hack basket that we were talking about earlier.
And that's what's so interesting about trends like hold my beer, um, like Twitter trends where it's like we're all just having the same joke and kind of playing Mad Libs with this joke structure that someone else invented, and there's no credit being given. It's just there. And you see TikToks where people take the jokes from one person and just lip sync to the jokes or copy them. Like it's so bizarre that I don't even know what to do with it. It's just people saying, there's this joke that someone created, and now it's mine. And
Have
now
you
I get it.
have you ever seen someone dab as a punchline or do the floss as a punchline? And you're like I remember someone dabbing when dabbing was like a big thing, which is like for people who don't know, it's like putting both of your arms towards one direction and putting your head into your arms. Um, I remember people doing it and being like, "That's not going to age well. What you're doing right now is not going to last in 2 months. 2 months, it's going to be awkward." And now, can you think about someone dabbing? Imagine we're at a party and someone starts dabbing. In fact, now that I think about that, that's so funny that I'm going to start doing it because it'll be so inappropriate. I'm going to start
And
dabbing all the
then
time.
and then I'm gonna go, hey Rob, you think that's funny? Hold my beer.
Adam, that's so funny. It's so funny to resurrect these old tropes and now do them. It's you know what? It's almost like the Borat, where it's like Borat was so exciting, everyone was doing my wife, and then everyone was like, "Don't do my wife." And then somewhere along the way, someone brought back my wife, ironically, and then now my wife is kind of like back. It's like pseudo ironic, but people still just kind of like it. So interesting about what we collectively can stomach, how much of the same content we can repeat, how much we can chew the food before we end up swallowing it.
Rob, do I make you horny?
Oh yeah. And like everyone kind of is blamed for Mike Myers is blamed for Austin Powers. He's blamed for Shrek because they were so popular and other people started repeating those jokes that they became like hacky and gross. Poor
Yeah.
Mike Myers. They were
Dude, do you know
funny
this?
when he did it the first time.
There's a great Sloan line. Sloan's a Canadian band that I just always think about where it's like they have a song where the chorus is, it's not the band that I hate, it's their fans.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing of like, yo, Austin Myers did an amazing thing. Mike
Austin
Myers
Powers.
did an amazing thing with Austin Powers, and we all ruined it. We just loved it
Totally.
so much, we ruined it.
And, for many people, these Marvel movies are a dream come true. And how many movies are we going to watch before we end up hating them? And it will not only ruin these new movies that are coming out, it will ruin the experience of the old movies as well. I mean, I think some people arrived to those Marvel movies being like, I hate these. So it's a ticking time bomb before we go, yeah, we've had enough of these themes and these tropes and these characters. I want something violently different.
Well, I would love to hear what you think. Reach out to us at The Backline Pod on Facebook and Twitter, at The Backline Podcast on Instagram. What do you think about being hack? What is hack? What does your community feel about those kinds of moves? Do your crowds love it? Do your crowds hate it? Reach out and let us know.
Why is
Rob,
Adam hack? Like all that stuff, yeah.
well, I mean, mainstream success. I create jokes that people copy. Just money, loads of money. Yeah.